Don't you dare touch my child!
Victoria's voice ripped through the crowded, opulent lobby like a serrated blade. She stood there, a vision of murderous fury in her crimson silk gown, her eyes burning with a hatred that could wither steel. She lunged forward, snatching the small girl's hand away with a violent jerk, while pointing a trembling, manicured finger directly at Jax's face. To the wealthy shoppers surrounding them, but Jax was nothing but a low-life maintenance man, a shadow in grease-stained overalls who had overstepped his bounds. But Jax didn't flinch. With a calm, terrifying deliberateness, he slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing a patch of scarred skin marked by a dark, weathered tattoo. An eagle clutching a bloody, broken sword. The arrogant sneer on Victoria's face didn't just fade. It froze. Her breath hitched in her throat, her face turning the color of ash. She stumbled back, was her voice a ghostly whisper as she uttered a code name that had been buried in a shallow grave 5 years ago. It can't be. You were dead. Welcome to the passenger seat. Lean in close and let me tell you about the day a ghost clawed his way out of the earth to settle a debt with the devil. Victoria didn't call the police. That was the first mistake everyone made about her. She didn't trust the law. She owned the people who wrote it. With a subtle, lethal flick of her wrist, she signaled to 4 men in charcoal suits standing near the fountain. They didn't hesitate. They reached into their jackets, drawing suppressed pistols with a professional grace that told Jax everything he needed to know. This wasn't a kidnapping. The girl, Ilara, wasn't Victoria's daughter. She was something far more valuable and far more dangerous. She was a biological target, a walking vault of data that Victoria had been hunting for years. But Victoria had forgotten who she was dealing with. She saw a man who fixed pipes. She forgot that I was the man who used to break empires. Jax didn't reach for a gun. He reached for the heavy pipe wrench hanging from his belt. In one fluid motion, he swung, smashing the glass casing of the mall's main electrical hub. Crack. Total darkness swallowed the atrium. The high-tech optics of the assassins were useless in the sudden void. Amidst the chaos of screaming socialites, Jax moved like a predator in his natural habitat. He scooped Ilara into his arms, her small heart hammering against his chest like a trapped bird. "Stay quiet, little one," he whispered, his voice a low vibration of steel. He didn't head for the exits where the snipers would be waiting. Instead, he kicked open a heavy iron grate and plunged into the pitch-black shadows of the maintenance tunnels, leaving a screaming, but humiliated Victoria to realize that the man she had just provoked wasn't just a laborer. He was the storm she had spent half a decade trying to outrun. The darkness of the sewers is a different kind of cold. It's a damp, heavy chill that smells of rot and forgotten things. I leaned against a slime-covered brick wall, my breath coming in short, jagged bursts. I could feel the hot, sticky dampness on my shoulder. A bullet had grazed me back in the atrium. With teeth gritted so hard I thought they would shatter, I ripped a strip of cloth from my grease-stained maintenance vest and tied it around the wound, cinching it tight with one hand. Beside me, Ilara stood in the knee-deep water, her eyes wide but silent. She didn't cry. She just watched my every move with an intelligence that was haunting for a child her age. I looked down at my arm, at the bloody eagle tattoo glowing faintly in the dim light of my emergency flashlight. "This tattoo used to mean something," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "It used to be a Medal of Honor. I bled for a country that promised to have my back. But when I came home with a collapsed lung and a soul full of shrapnel, they discarded me. They threw me away like yesterday's trash." I looked at Ilara, my voice thickening with a resentment that had been simmering for years. "I'm an elite operator, a ghost of the battlefield, Yet here I am, scraping sludge out of drains just to pay for my son's hospital bed. While people like Victoria, monsters who build empires on the backs of the broken, sit in their ivory towers and suck this country dry. Tell me, is there anyone else out here? Any veterans? Any laborers? Any fathers who have been turned away by the system when you needed it most? Drop a comment and let me know I'm not the only one bleeding in the dark tonight. Because every drop of blood I lose today is a reminder of a promise they broke. The silence was broken by the small metallic click of a chain. Ilara reached into the collar of her dress and pulled out a silver locket. With trembling fingers, she took it off and handed it to me. I opened it, expecting a family photo of the billionaire's daughter. My heart stopped. The woman in the tiny, faded photograph wasn't Victoria. It was Sarah, my wife, the woman who had been murdered 3 years ago in what the police called a botched robbery. She told me to wait for the man with the eagle, Ilara whispered, her voice finally breaking the silence. I looked at the girl, then back at the photo. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Ilara wasn't Victoria's daughter. She was a genetic blueprint. Sarah hadn't just been a researcher, she had discovered the universal cure for cancer, a multi-trillion-dollar secret she had hidden within the genetic code of this child before Victoria had her assassinated. Victoria didn't want a daughter. She wanted the patent to immortality, and she was willing to kill every version of the truth to get it. I closed the locket, my grip tightening until the silver bit into my palm. I wasn't just a maintenance man anymore. I wasn't just a fugitive. I was a father protecting the legacy of a woman they had tried to erase. Victoria thought she was hunting a ghost. She's about to find out that some ghosts don't just haunt you, they burn your world to the ground. Emerging from the bowels of the city into the neon glare of the surface felt like walking onto the sun. The air was thick with the smell of street food and exhaust, a jarring contrast to the rot of the sewers. I kept my head down, pulling my grease-stained hood over my face, while Ilara stayed tucked under my oversized maintenance jacket. Her small hand gripped my shirt so hard I could feel her nails through the fabric. I looked up, and for the first time in my life, I felt true, paralyzed fear. On every giant screen in the square, every pixel of the digital sky was occupied by my face. It was a mugshot from my discharge papers, but edited to look menacing, shadowed. Above it, in blood-red letters, were the words, "National Amber Alert, armed and dangerous." Below my face was a video clip of Victoria. She was on a balcony, her red silk dress replaced by a modest black suit, her eyes red from staged tears. "My daughter. She's all I have," she sobbed into a dozen microphones. "He's a disturbed maintenance worker, a man with a violent military past. He took her from the mall. Please, if you see this monster, do not approach. Just call the authorities. Jax, if you're listening, please don't hurt her." The crowd around me began to murmur, their eyes darting from their phones to the people next to them. The trap was perfect. Victoria hadn't just used her money to hunt me. She had used her power to rewrite reality. I wasn't the man who had served his country. I was a predator. I wasn't the man saving a child from a genetic lab. I was a monster. I felt a surge of bile in my throat. This was how the system worked. They didn't need to kill you if they could make the world hate you enough to do the job for them. "We have to move," I whispered to Ilara. "Now." We dodged into a side alley just as a police cruiser screamed past, its lights reflecting off the puddles. I needed wheels, not a bus, not a taxi. Those were rolling traps. I needed something fast, something that could disappear into the grid. At the end of the alley, a high-end Tesla Model Z sat humming at a charging station. It was a biometric-locked, AI-driven fortress on wheels. Most people would have walked past it, but most people didn't have my background. I smashed the passenger window with a quick, silent strike from my tactical glass breaker. I pulled Alara inside and scrambled into the driver's seat. The dashboard screamed, "Unauthorized access detected, biometric scan failed. Would lock down in 10 seconds. I didn't panic. I pulled a spool of industrial copper wire from my maintenance kit. I knew exactly how to trigger the emergency bypass. I jammed one end of the wire into the OBD2 diagnostic port under the steering column, and with a focused breath, I connected the other end directly to the positive terminal of the 12-volt auxiliary battery located under the frunk's interior panel. "Watch this," I muttered, mostly to drown out the alarm. "The high-voltage surge will overload the biometric encryption layer. By grounding the data bus directly to the lead-acid battery, I'm forcing the car's central processing unit to reset into factory diagnostic mode. The raw current will bypass the AI lockout and spark the drive motor into immediate ignition." I touched the wires. A blue spark jumped. The dashboard flickered. The red "lockdown" text vanished and was replaced by a calm green "diagnostic mode active." Drive enabled. As I slammed the car into gear and floored it, the silent electric motor pinning us back into the seats. I knew the experts in the comments would probably scream that you can't hot-wire a state-of-the-art EV with a piece of copper and a battery jump, that the electronics would fry or the security would brick the car. But in my world, when the rules are written by the people trying to kill you, you learn to break the laws of physics along with the laws of man. But if any of you tech gurus think you have a better way to bypass a level 5 biometric lockdown in under 10 seconds, let me know. I'd love to hear your expert opinion while I'm running for my life. As we sped away from the neon lights of Manhattan, Alara looked out the rear window. "They're coming, aren't they?" "Let them come," I said, my grip tightening on the steering wheel until the leather groaned. "They think they're hunting a criminal, or they're about to find out they're chasing a ghost who's tired of hiding. And Victoria, she's about to find out that once the eagle spreads its wings, there isn't a skyscraper in this city tall enough to keep her safe." We hit the highway, a silent bullet of stolen tech flying through the rain. The domino effect had started. One secret had led to a kidnapping. One kidnapping to a national manhunt. Now the final domino was wobbling, and it was pointed straight at the heart of Victoria's empire. The screen of the stolen Tesla flickered to life, overriding the GPS. I didn't have to answer. Victoria had already hacked the connection. Her face appeared, framed by the sterile white walls of a private hospital suite. She looked perfect. Not a hair out of place, her black suit sharp enough to draw blood. But it wasn't her face that made my heart drop into my stomach. It was the background. Behind her, lying in a bed too large for his small frame, was Leo. My son. His eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling to the mechanical rhythm of a machine. Victoria leaned over him, her manicured hand stroking his hair with a terrifying, motherly tenderness. "Beautiful tattoo, Ghost," she said, her voice dripping with a venomous satisfaction. "The eagle clutching a broken sword. I should have known. You were always the most stubborn piece of the puzzle. 5 years ago, I thought I'd burned the bridge. I didn't realize you were the one under it. Waiting." I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather began to split. My knuckles were white, my vision tunneling into a narrow point of pure, incandescent rage. "If you touch him, Victoria, if you so much as breathe on him wrong, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you suffer in ways the devil hasn't even invented yet." Victoria laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the car's speakers. "Threats? From a man whose face is currently on every news channel as a child abductor? You're a fugitive, Jax. You have nothing. But I have everything, including the heart rate-activated explosive strapped to your son's chest. She shifted the camera. My breath hitched. There, taped over Leo's heart, was a compact, high-tech device with a pulsing red LED. It's synchronized to his pulse, she explained calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. If his heart stops, it goes off. If I press this button on my phone, it goes off. And if I pull this ventilator plug, well, his heart will eventually stop. And then, boom, a very messy ending for a very sick little boy. I slammed the brakes, the car skidding to a halt on the rainy shoulder of the highway. Ilara looked at the screen, her small face pale, her eyes welling with tears. She knew. She understood exactly what was happening. "What do you want?" I rasped, but my voice sounding like it was being dragged over broken glass. "You know what I want, Jax. I want the girl. I want Sarah's legacy. I want the cure." Victoria's eyes gleamed with an insatiable greed. "That child in your car is the only thing that can save my pharmaceutical empire from bankruptcy. She is the blueprint for a $1 trillion future. Bring her to the roof of the Victoria Tower in 1 hour. If I see a single police light, if I hear a single siren, I'll pull the plug and watch your son turn into red mist. The choice is yours, specialist. One boy's life for the future of humanity. Or rather, for my future." The call cut out. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the sound of rain drumming on the roof. I looked at Ilara. She was the final piece of Sarah. My wife had died to protect this girl, to protect the hope she carried in her very DNA, where this child was the answer to every parent's prayer, a universal cure for the disease that had killed millions. If I gave her to Victoria, the cure would be locked behind a paywall, sold only to the richest 1%, used as a weapon of profit. Sarah's dream would become a nightmare. But then I thought of Leo, my boy, the only thing I had left that still called me Dad. Every night I spent scrubbing drains, every insult I took from the elites, every drop of blood I spilled. It was all for him. I drove to the city, my mind a war zone. I didn't go to the tower. I went to the construction site of the skyscraper directly opposite it. I took my old tactical gear, the things I had buried 5 years ago, out of a hidden compartment in my maintenance bag. I assembled the long-range sniper rifle with the mechanical memory of a man who had never truly left the war. Now, I'm standing on the ledge of the 50th floor, the wind whipping around me, the cold rain soaking through my clothes. Across the gap, through my high-powered scope, I can see Victoria. She's standing on her rooftop, holding Leo's hand. She has him tied to a chair next to a cooling unit. Ilara is sitting at my feet, her hand resting on my boot, trusting me to make the right decision. My finger is on the trigger. I have one shot. If I shoot Victoria, the heart rate monitor on Leo will detect her death or his fear, and the bomb might trigger. If I surrender Ilara, I save my son, but I doom the world and betray the memory of my wife. I've been staring through this lens for 60 seconds, the longest 60 seconds of my life. I'm a man who was trained to make impossible choices, but this isn't a mission. This is my soul. On one side, the life of my own flesh and blood, the boy I promised to protect. On the other, the legacy of the woman I loved and the hope of millions of children just like Leo. Victoria thinks she's trapped me. She thinks she's found my breaking point. Tell me the truth. Don't give me the action movie answer. Give me the father answer. If you were standing in my boots, feeling the cold steel of the rifle against your cheek, knowing that whatever you do, you lose a piece of your heart forever, who would you sacrifice? Would you give up the girl to save your son? Or would you pull the trigger and pray for a miracle, even if it meant watching your own child die. Who would you sacrifice? I can see her smiling through the scope. She thinks she's won. She thinks the eagle has finally been grounded. She has no idea that a man with nothing left to lose doesn't just spread his wings. He burns the sky down with them. They say a ghost only stays in the world because it has unfinished business. Victoria thought she had cornered the ghost. She thought she had presented me with a choice that would break my soul, my son's life or my wife's legacy. She forgot that a man who has lived in the shadows for 5 years doesn't just play the game, he rewrites the rules. I didn't pull the trigger of that sniper rifle. Not yet. Instead, I descended from the construction site and walked onto the helipad of the Victoria Tower. I held Ilara's hand, looking like a defeated man, a peasant ready to surrender his pride for his blood. Victoria stood there in her crimson dress, her smile wide and predatory. She had the ventilator remote in one hand and my son's life in the other. "The eagle has landed," she mocked, her voice echoing over the roar of the wind. "Hand her over, Jax. Give me the cure, and I'll let the boy breathe another day." I didn't say a word. I pushed Ilara forward. As she walked toward Victoria, I looked at the small silver locket around her neck. Victoria didn't know that while we were in that stolen Tesla, I hadn't just been driving. I had used my maintenance kit and the car's high-voltage auxiliary battery to build a short-range, high-intensity EMP burst chip. I'd hidden it inside Sarah's locket. The moment Victoria's greedy fingers touched Ilara's shoulder, I pressed the button in my palm. Zwap. A blue spark hissed from the locket. For exactly 5 seconds, every electronic device within a 10-meter radius died. The heart rate monitor on Leo's chest went black. The remote in Victoria's hand became a useless piece of plastic. The ventilator's backup battery kicked in, but the wireless signal to the bomb was severed. 5 seconds. To a normal man, it's nothing. To a specialist, it's an eternity. I moved. I didn't run. I became a blur of tactical precision. I used my rescue rope to swing across the gap of the ventilation shaft, my boots slamming into Victoria's chest before she could even blink. The air left her lungs in a sickening wheeze as she hit the concrete. I scooped Leo into one arm and Ilara into the other, shielding them as the secondary pulse of the jammer wore off. But I wasn't done. The real revenge wasn't the punch. It was the truth. I'd used the EMP burst to also trigger a hardwired override I'd installed in the tower's main server room while I was just a maintenance man months ago. High above us, every digital billboard in Times Square, every television in the city, and every news terminal in the country flickered. Victoria's face didn't appear as a grieving mother. Instead, the world saw her encrypted emails. They saw the act of God insurance fraud, where they saw Sarah's research, the universal cure, being uploaded to every open-source medical database on the planet for free. The pharmaceutical empire didn't just fall, it evaporated. Trillions of dollars of profit turned into zero in a single heartbeat. The FBI helicopters swarmed the roof, their spotlights blinding. They didn't come for the abductor. They came for the criminal in the red dress. As they handcuffed Victoria, she screamed in a voice that was no longer a goddess's. It was the sound of a cornered rat realizing the cage was finally locked. The ride home tonight is quiet. My son is asleep in the back seat of a government-provided SUV, his heart beating a steady, healthy rhythm. Ilara is next to him, finally safe, carrying the light that Sarah died to protect. Because of the whistleblower reward and the recovery of the stolen research, I'll never have to scrub sewers again. We have a house on the hill now, with a garden for Mia and a workshop for me. They used to call me trash. They used to think I was a ghost, They were right. I'm a ghost that finally found his way home. The porch light is on. The eagle has finally folded its wings. If you believe that a father's love is the only power that can't be bought, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and tell Leo he has the bravest dad in the world. We're home, kids. Everything is going to be okay.